two of the things that give birth to giallo are the misappropriation of two things, or the misunderstanding of two things. One is, the mystery literature like Agatha Christie, the whodunit, that gives birth to that. And the other one is Hitchcock, which is one of the most misunderstood auteurs and directors of all times. I mean,
there's so many quotes in that movie. I mean,
yeah,
the drain, how the bat flies in, everything.
Yes, but and even to Night of the Eagle and other movies. But what is truly crazy is, for me, Suspiria is worth all the logic problems, all the this and that for the last 10 minutes. Both movies. There are many things they have in common, many things that show which one works completely and which one doesn't. I think both have the worst arrivals to the airport ever. That's for sure. But both of them depend, for whenever they work, in the absolute suspension of logic. The problem is Argento tries to create a baseline that completely wouldn't work.
Do you think he really cares, though? I mean,
No, he doesn't. But I'm saying that the parts. I mean, I think is definitely a deranged fairy tale.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But the moments where supposedly we are watching a baseline reality are hilariously impossible. From everything from Udo Kier as a psychiatrist to everything. But
may be the greatest piece of illogic in the
in the whole movie. But I don't think either of them tried to do that. The thing that is curious is that through every piece of madness in Fellini's film, all that stylization and all the illogic and all this creates moments of profound reality, of profound things that we can identify. Essentially, I think Fellini is probably the best portraiture of jet lag ever done, number one, but also of the absolute horror of being trapped in Toby Dammit.
Yeah.
It
feels almost like with Fellini that there's this curiosity that he's to the dream state, and he's kind of reaching into it and trying to bring it back down. Yeah. Whereas like Argento just like lives in the dream state.
Yes.
And he has not really much interest in bringing it back.
But it's almost like Argento's movie is almost created by an alien mind.
Have you met him?
Yes, I met him and love him and I make him laugh. Yeah. All of that.
He's kind of an alien.
It is, but that's the thing, that you can see Fellini is a guy that is rooted on earth. At the end of the day, he is profoundly satirizing and profoundly synthesizing things that are real, that you can recognize. The state of alienation of the pop culture idol, the state of, I mean, I've never seen an Oscar ceremony more accurately portrayed. The old comedian.
An Italian award ceremony.
Yeah, but I mean, personally, I've been to all those ceremonies. I've met all those people. But Argento, he definitely, and more as his work progresses, and he loses a little bit of the madness of youth, you see that his mind doesn't work with reality at all. I mean, it really is its own world.
Well, it's not really his best film, but when you go back to the Argentos, you keep thinking about the Stendhal syndrome. Yes. And the philosophy behind it, and this idea of completely losing yourself in a work of art, particularly like a surreal or horrific work of art. Yes. And it both seems to be his practice and his intent as a filmmaker. Like he kind of loses himself in it and has the intention of having you get lost in it as well.
It is, and Suspiria has, is the one that combines horror and the giallo, sort of effectively. It really gets all the fetishistic stuff from the giallo. The murders have a ritualistic thing. I always say that both Argento and Fulci are getting high on their own supply. Most definitely, you see them getting off.
Guilt-free, unlike someone like Michael Haneke.
Yeah, no, it's completely Mediterranean sadism. It's like, hey, yeah, certo, sono un sadico. I'm completely, they are not apologizing about it. He's truly engrossed to the point. I mean, Argento's movies, the best ones, are without a doubt unique works of art. And, it's almost, when we talk about logic, we talk about logic exclusively in the same way that someone would fault the lack of realism in The Scream by Monk. You know, like, well, the skin doesn't look quite real. You cannot, you cannot quite argue. They are expressionistic, insane, operatic works of art.
They talk about how Fellini's, well, certainly with Toby Dammit, he's in the middle of like drawing all of his Jungian dream fantasies that he's writing down, and you do feel it in the film that this obviously, kind of came from an actual, it must have come from an actual dream that actually made it into the Book of Dreams. But you always feel with Fellini, like, there's some good dreams, there's some bad dreams, there's some sort of funny dreams that he's always seems to be drawing from, whereas in Argento, it's all nightmare.
All nightmare. And what is curious is, seriously, like, the things that are creaky in Argento's movies is when he pretends to understand reality. Seriously, like the states of fantasy. You see, to me, fairy tales gave birth to the horror story, linearly. In the history of storytelling in humanity, we had fairy tales first, and it ends. And the last 10 minutes are out of Snow White. Like the most absolutely lurid, horrific Snow White story ever. I mean, and it is very strange to see that, because when you see the beginning is giallo properly, blah blah blah, and little by little, I mean, the moment of inflection takes 10 minutes or more of explanation. But Udo Kier and a German psychiatrist with a bad haircut. I mean, it literally takes 10 minutes for us to say, okay, everything. But by then the mood has settled, and you get into this state of panic at the end, literally panic in the most profound sense of the word. And the ending is a pagan nightmare. And I always see Jessica Harper at the end in the rain, and I don't know if is the character finally being free or the rap shot for her. But she looks so happy.
Great smile. Yeah, makes a smile.
But I adore the movie, and watching it again, you just go. I mean, the fact that at some points in Argento's mind, that academy really exists or not, that's his baseline. Crazy reality.
The other thing I wanted to ask you was, like, there's you're a very technically precise filmmaker, and part of me wonders whether it's technically sloppy or whether it's absolutely precise. The sort of depths of field with crazy focus everywhere. The music that seems to, I mean, that soundtrack in Bell Lightbox. I've seen the film a lot, but always the music is muffled, and this house kind of made it a little overwhelming. I don't know how the rest of you felt. But.
Yeah, I think, for example, Mario Bava is a much more academic filmmaker, and even when he takes the license of color, saturated color, or absolute expressionistic light, you see him following an academic path. Argento is just free form. He literally is riffing. Is in the same way, I think that's why Fellini and him are a great double program, because they are both completely free form with the storytelling. Fellini goes from a POV roaming at the airport to a close-up of him to a cut and you see how absolutely almost collage narrative technique they both use. And that's why I think it only creaks when it's the baseline. And this is the red room, and we're really practicing ballet. No, you're not. You are Nurse Diesel and Frau Blucher rolled into one, and this is a fucking mad nightmare. So might as well get on with it. And Miguel Bosé is here. It really, and that's why I think Argento simply should be taken like an enactment of pure fantasy, and the dynamic with the girls. You can sort of sense the post-Rosemary's Baby vibes, the post-Hitchcockian quotes, all this stuff. But ultimately, if you are not permeable to Argento, you should not watch it. So you go, okay, there you go, have it your way.
There was a couple sitting behind me, and they just weren't having it at all. They left a while ago. Yeah. The maggots, I think, did them in.
Yeah, but horror is like that. Horror. That's why the two genres that are completely they find their audience are horror and porn. You're not getting off. You're gonna leave. Absolutely, you're gonna leave, because it's so extreme, and ultimately that's why also the fans are so absolutely addicted, because you can understand the rules of the genre and go, yeah. But But I think that, without a doubt, for me, this is Argento at his purest. You know, because
I'm a big opera fan too, which, by the way, if you want to hang around, is playing at 11 o'clock across the hall. Opera, I think there's a little bit more control with some of the set pieces, which is sometimes a good and a bad thing. I mean, the example in this one, the shot that kind of blew my mind, I don't think I've ever seen it this big, is when she walks up into the attic, and the focus is completely on a patch of light that has no relation to reality halfway on the shot.
Yeah.
She's totally out of focus. The door that she's going to go through is totally out of focus. Like it escapes all logic, and yet it's totally creepy.
Well, there is a great. I mean, with Italian genre, you know, like you can discuss what is technically calculated and what was accident. I mean, like, you know, you think about Lucio Fulci and the famous Olga Carlato's splinter through the eye shot, and you think part of the reason Fulci went that close is because Gianetto di Rossi's piece, he had cast the whole head, but only this piece gelled. Right. So they were forced to be that close. And you know, I remember a moment in Don't Look Now, Nicholas Roeg, where the policeman, who is the same actor that plays the doctor, in this movie, shows him a sketch of the possible suspect, and he says, but it doesn't look at all like him, and he says, it doesn't matter. It's a little bit like, with great Italian genre, was it calculated or a pure accident? It doesn't matter.
One of the interesting things in Toby Dammit too was, but I mean, of course, with Argento and Fulci, there's an obsessiveness around eyes, particularly women's eyes. But Fellini was all over his eyes, you know, and there's constant cuts to these really tight close-ups and sort of like the weird kind of bloodshot eye, you know, white pieces. What is it about Italians and eyes?
I don't know. I will laugh, Dario, but I mean, certainly what is beautiful is the way he achieves. You know, he uses the eyes of the characters to tell the story. Toby Dammit, he has an asymmetric face. One of his sides is perpetually frowning. The girl with the incredible mascara work. I mean, it's really fascinating that they are obsessive about detail and atmosphere. You know, they go to the extreme close-up or a complete atmospheric, almost bacchanal. You know, people coming in and out. It's like a pageantry. I really enjoyed seeing the double program and the theatricality of Fellini, who the difference I think between the two is that Fellini is making it from the start, never pretends there's a baseline of reality. The plane is fake, the landing is fake, everything is fake, you know, and I think that creates a cohesiveness that is really compelling in the short. And I think that when you think about the original story of Edgar Allan Poe, you see that ultimately he's riffing on the essence of the story. And that is just the ultimately the destiny of Toby Dammit is going to be fulfilled. And it's great when you see he's constantly uncomfortable on his neck, pulling on the scarf. It's like his head is barely attached to him during the whole short. And I find that really smart, compelling, instinctive. The best thing about Italian filmmakers, all of them, but certainly the genre ones, is that they are absolutely guided by gut, by instinct. You know, they are completely visceral, compulsive by that. You can see Fellini, Fulci, Argento, all of it is compulsive. Completely, they are absolutely captive of their own passions.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes confusion. I think that there's something academic in Fellini with, you know, these certain kinds of grotesques come up again and again. And when in his interviews, it did feel much more like a compulsion than actually something that was sort of deliberate in the scripts or on the set. It just, you needed to have those characters in to give himself comfort.
Well, but what is great is tonally. I mean, he used to be a cartoonist. Everybody knows that. And ultimately, what his movies manage is, you know, in the same way that Hogarth was a cartoonist of his time. You know, he makes these frescoes of all the people that not only he encountered and collected in his notebooks, but he puts them together in a way that they rhyme. And I think that he gives you this, you know, everything that you're hearing is deranged, but ultimately recognizable. The woman in all fours getting out of the camera angle. I mean, there are moments of reality, and there are moments if you've been to Rome and you've been driving in the morning, it's pure realism sometimes. And it echoes La Dolce Vita, and it echoes the decadence of many of his films.
I mean, it's almost like Fellini's the Mannerist painter and Argento's the Baroque, right?
Yeah, it's Baroque or the Faubist,
Right.
the Faubist, completely savage. You know, Argento just is like Jackson Pollock, you know, like just come on, hey, certo.
Make it blue.
Make it blue. And to see that ultimately they both willfully create a world with its own rules, and I really think of both as fairy tales, because certainly Fellini's, the original story and the way he riffs on it has the simplicity of a fairy tale. In the original story, the devil is a little old man, and Toby Dammit jumps a bridge, and a pipe severs his head. But ultimately, it's a very simple tale. And Poe, many times Poe, like Hop Frog and other short stories, he has the simplicity of the fairy tale. And I think with Argento, to me, the most successful parts are the beginning and the end, in a way, because they are the ones that are absolutely free of logic.
Yeah.
You don't need a plot to start a movie, and you don't need a plot to end a movie. You can just pay all your wagers. You know, like, and that's, you start and you place your wagers, and you say, this is the high stakes of the house, all the way to the girl coming through the window and killing the girl below. Which is like, I'll kill her too. Like, I'll kill her too. You know, and then you come to the plot, and the plot, as I say, it gets bumpy when you get into logic.
Yeah.
You know, where you can feel the market needs
Why are you
a
dancing?
story.
Stop dancing.
Yeah, just like, and then at the end, it becomes that again. You pay all the wagers, saying, "I'm going to terrify you with a pure fairy tale."
And some of that is also like it feels like there's got to be a lot of '60s American grindhouse in here as well. You know, like the motorcycle gang just goes on a frenzy at the end. You know? And that there was almost a permission granted by those grindhouse movies to let them go. Okay, well, last 20 minutes. You know,
you go.
I'm free to be who I want to be, right?
Yeah, and I really am so happy Argento A exists, and B, Argento got away with it. I'm so happy this movie, with any flaws and any advantages, whatever, it's an artifact. It's almost impossible to think, A, that it would be financed, and B, that it would actually be as free as it is. It's almost impossible, because we become so accustomed at the meta language of the genre and riffing on it in a postmodern way, and the wink and the nudge that the genre has now, that it's almost executed exclusively by fans of the genre that know every. It really is an amazing artifact.
Any other filmmakers that come to mind that would give him the permission to go this deep into a nightmare before him, other than Bava? Is he seeing any films from other places?
I think I just think he is his own. I mean, you can identify certain motifs, like the sort of Victorian little boy. It's again present in Deep Red before. You can identify certain things. I really think Argento, like Lovecraft, was a solitary creature that raised himself. Like he kind of gave birth to himself completely. I mean, two misanthropic little boys growing up into being absolutely deranged geniuses.
So maybe we should hear from you guys. Does anyone have any comments or questions for our esteemed guest tonight? You in the middle there.
Thanks. I just want to ask about Inferno. What do you think of Argento's follow-up to this film?
I love it. It's like, for me, it's a tie between this and Inferno. Inferno has, my favorite sequence in Inferno was actually directed by Mario Bava, which is the Mario Bava directed the underwater, and I tried so many times to ape it. Like I tried with Ape Sapien on Hellboy. Him swimming amongst the floating things and grabbing the, it's just, and as I say, Argento is about in that respect, Argento, Brian De Palma, who are sort of trying to ape Hitchcock in a very strange way, oblique way, ultimately are like Hitchcock in one sense. They are sequence filmmakers. There is always in an Argento movie, always in a De Palma movie, and always in a Hitchcock movie, a sequence that stands out. I mean, in Inferno, I think that sequence and the sequence that echoes the sequence with the dog here, where the guy goes to drown the kittens in the park, and the hot dog vendor ends up stabbing him without any logic whatsoever. And I think that's what works with Fulci, Argento, Bava. Horror depends on the suspension or the violation of logic, for sure. You know, you always, when you're willing, I hate it when in American movies, horror movies are very logical movies. I go, you don't understand. And I argue with producers all the time, for me or the directors I'm producing it, oh, you know, we need to know more about this. No, you don't. You don't, and you shouldn't. You know, and Argento is so beautiful. It's almost like Buñuel has that quintessential moment. Horror is about rhyming things that don't go together and creating a third really dark meaning, like the moon and the cloud cutting it in the Shenandoah and then the razor blade cutting the eye. That's a rhyme. It produces sort of a third significant thing that is incredibly creepy and unsettling. And Argento does that with the dog. He does it certainly at the end, and he does it in Inferno, in the sequence where the focus is you're following linearly a guy going to drown the kittens. The rats attack him. How fantastic is that for a pitch? He goes to drown the kittens and the rats attack him. Oh, pray continue, Dario. You know? And then the night, the moon and the hot dog vendor, he stabs him repeatedly. Fantastic. That's fucking good. And I mean, it's like the hairiest, most sweatiest set of balls you can ever expect anyone to have. I mean, this guy's ball sack is the size of a small fucking potato sack. This guy, and I think horror should not be attempted without full belief in what you're doing. Like, he needs to be completely convinced. Fulci was completely convinced. And so on and so forth. And the same is true of Fellini in his own universe.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, once when Argento was here for a Midnight Madness screening, he actually, just on a riffing about something, started talking about he has a certain admiration for Bollywood films. And it's funny, when I watch the films and his belief that the story can continue, and then the story can actually stop, and something else can happen for 10 minutes, and then you can kind of go back to the story, you know, which is really not allowed in Hollywood filmmaking. And there's sort of some kind of fun symmetry with that, you know, that there's another way of talking about making films, that you can have something else going on for 10 minutes that doesn't necessarily have to relate to what else is there.
And when you go back to fairy tales, you go back to the German fairy tales or Eastern European fairy tales, it's great because you start with the story of a prince that is going to liberate a princess, and he goes to the mountain to talk to the Goblin King, and he has to free the golden bird, and then he himself is turned into a possum that lives in a cave. And you keep going, and finally, at some point, they get together. But you know, it's almost like ultimately, for me, the beauty of storytelling is not logic, it's flow. Flow. And I admire, the filmmakers I most admire are the filmmakers that manage to create their own rules and make their movies flow. You know, and you can see the inheritance of Fellini in Terry Gilliam even. You know, and how Terry also is an incredibly instinctive filmmaker with technically precise.
Yeah, Abba Chapon, who's also kind of interested in the same kind of dream states, his double bill was Roma and Brazil, which is really good.
Perfect. Perfect double bill. I mean, Roma contains some of the moments that I most admire in Fellini. One of them is the beautiful moment in which they're drilling for the subway, and they find the Roman frescoes, and the frescoes disappear in front of our eyes. And it's such a gorgeous metaphor for art. Like, it exists and it vanishes for us to see it. You know, it's such an exquisite thing, and it's at the same time simply what happened. You know, which is great about Fellini, is both an incredible mannerist and a realist at the same time.
Sort of like plucked from reality, put through his head, and turned into something. So
that is a very good way of putting it.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, up there.
Do you think there's any significance to both directors choosing Anglophones to freak out?
Is there any significance in both directors choosing Anglophone, British actor, or English-speaking actors to, did you say freak out?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, you mean, tradition in Italian film is always to sort of anchor a movie on an English actor most of the time. Yeah, except Masrani, but in genre certainly. And no, I don't know. I think that the reason I think is beautiful with Toby Dammit is because the alienation of this actor is complete, and he's literally having a monologue about himself in a place where they don't understand him. You know, he's literally collapsing there and saying, "I could have been a great actor, but I'm not." It's so tragic. He's revealing himself to a completely indifferent audience. You know, and it's beautiful that even his very craft, the reason why he's famous, the reason why they got him there and gave him the Ferrari, he's alien to them because he says, recite Shakespeare, yeah, but make it quick. Because, you know, you don't want to talk about Shakespeare for a long time. It's really fantastic in that.
Yeah, David Hemmings, of course, and Ponderosa as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, if you think about it for a second, is I think in both movies is the Anglo-linear mind being exposed to a non-linear environment. Yeah, completely facing all this thing. And what I think is great about Tommy Dammit is ultimately this guy has barely managed to keep his head attached to himself. And now he goes into what is essentially a full-blown rampage. And finally, the medium in which he lands is such decadence, such non-functionality, and he finally loses it.
Fellini kind of sets it up in a funny way, Dante versus Shakespeare, right?
Yes, where he says it's only second to Dante. But the way Fellini appropriates an image that, make no mistake, that girl in Mario Bava's Kill Baby Kill, which is the essence of this image of the devil, was incredibly well known in Italy at that time, and he appropriates it and he uses it to, you know, to sort of to every end. I don't want to circumscribe a single meaning to it, because you can say, well, Toby Dammit was a bit of a pedophile because he has that moment with the virgin girl. Is she a virgin? But I think it's part of his decadence and all that, or the innocence he lost, or simply the fact that he is like every decadent, you know, halfway between pure good and pure evil. And the purity of the evil can be only represented by the purity of childhood, which is the girl. And that was the greatest decadent of them all was this lieutenant of Joan of Arc, who was the basis for Blue Bird, you know, and he was a pious crusader that fought for good, and God never answered him. And he got so pissed off that he said, if I cannot be the best man, I'll be the worst man. And after that, he mutilated, raped, murdered, and cannibalized hundreds of people. You know, and the devil, unfortunately for him, also never answered. So he ended up, you know, going through a process detailed in a book by George Bataille that is fantastic. But is this, I think, is the essence. The decadent character is halfway between good and evil, and the devil is pure.
No, because it's, I mean, he doesn't really behave like a sodden alcoholic in a way. He behaves exactly like, you know, the kind of opium-soaked, syphilitic Victorian, you know, who's incapable of sort of even grasping the reality around him, but, you know, just wants more.
100%. 100%. And the thing that I find incredible about it is how modern and how now, the print is pretty good. I mean, I think it's the best I've seen it, but it really, you can see Fellini living in Lady Gaga also. You know, like, this is a pop star. I mean, he is, what is great is that he is a Shakespearean pop star, which even at that time or now is completely the range.
I know, we should wait for like the awards show in a grotto Lady Gaga video.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, someone else. Anybody? Yes.
If you could pair a Fellini film with one of your films, what would it be?
If you could pair a Fellini film with one of your films, Guillermo, what would they be?
I would pair Devil's Vagabond with Mario Bava gladly, because Mario Bava was a huge influence for me in that movie. Fellini, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of, you know, sometimes people say about things like Hellboy, they say, you know, the acting is not good, not realistic. I go, listen, you can't have a red guy, a blue guy, and a guy made of gas, and try for them to act like realistic actors. So I don't know. I mean, I learned from him a lot about color. I mean, the beauty of Fellini is Hitchcock made the transition from silent to sound, and when he did that transition, he says in the Truffaut book, he says, "I understood that sound was, if it was to be used, it was to be used in the most precise way to storytell, for the storytelling." And Fellini says as much about color. When he makes his transition from the sort of neo-realism type of palette of black and white to color, he says, none of the colors on my films will be casual. They will help to tell the story. So I do that. I think Pan's Labyrinth would come to mind and stuff like that. But you know, the beauty of it is when you hear that declaration of language and how formally the Fellini's movies depended on the intensity of the colors, the choice. It's true of Suspiria also. Yeah. Suspiria, the art direction is the most deranged art direction in history, and yet it works.
Till the monster sequences in Pans, actually.
Yeah.
Like there's some interesting connections, I think, between Suspiria and Pans. I would
Curious, yeah, I saw them today.
Yeah.
And what is funny about
Stuff
Suspiria,
for the monster.
yeah, one of them, and the secret door. But I love how, watching it again and again, you see Argento trying to mix a neo-Gothic exterior with Escher designs in the doors and deco, and it's like Escher and a deco and Gothic. Yes, Dario, why the fuck not? It's like, I wish we all had that freedom. You know, I wish we all had the absolute conviction this guy has. He's a hero. He's a hero of mine.
Do you want to see some? Yeah, I think up there.
Can you talk about Suspiria's relationship with Black Swan?
Yeah. It's beyond. I think beyond that. Of course, you can go to that. But if you are familiar with, for example, Satoshi Kon, Perfect Blue, it's like a triangulation. Perfect Blue, Black Swan, and Suspiria in a way. And it's because at the end of the day, Black Swan is a giallo. You know, sort of this descent to madness. I mean, it owes a huge debt to Repulsion. Polanski's Repulsion, in the sense that it's ultimately beneath the calm waters of an introverted mind lies raging torrents of madness and brutality. You know, that is what it's the tale about Repulsion. But I think it's the giallo. Definitely, Black Swan is a giallo, and it's even a giallo in this fact. For a giallo to be really, really good, and this is where your point connects, you need to have, even if they are not fully in control, sometimes the sequences need technical virtuosity to function. You know, Argento may or may not, he may be messy over here, and a little, same with Fulci, messy over here, but there are moments, fortuitous or not, where technically they are just astounding, and the choices are mind-blowing. And Black Swan, I was watching it, and I was just enjoying the hell out of Aronofsky's work, who is also, in many ways, a very artificial filmmaker, you know, who is a guy that constructs his own reality.
He loves the set piece, too.
Yes, yeah. So very much, I think, is a triangulation through the giallo genre.
But I think I kind of agree with you that I think the film is much more about control, which is a much more French topic than Italian one. So the Repulsion comparison, and a lot of French cinema of the '70s, I think, also.
Yeah, because ultimately you need the repressive surface, which also works in Japan in Perfect Blue, right, the Satoshi Kon movie. You need what is great is the juxtaposition of this madness with a medium of absolute control, like the ballet. That is really, really smart. And it was it didn't need to be an occult science and ballet company. It was just ballet.
The control of dance, I don't think play has a huge factor.
No. But what is great is how, I tell you, I always call it in the storytelling, in the screenplay, is a point of inflection, where literally you are watching one movie and then it takes 10 minutes for them to go, and you turn to get you to the ending. I fucking admire it.
Anybody else? Yes, in the front.
Do you think that 10 minutes with Udo Kier, do you think that was producers coming in? Do you think Argento allowed that?
The question was, do you think that 10 minutes with Udo Kier and the German psychoanalyst with the bad hair, was that a demand of the producers?
The short answer is it doesn't matter. but let us say that for a moment you want to analyze it. You can find it on Argento in all his movies. I mean, remember, giallo does come from a literary form, and the literary form of the whodunit and the sort of Hitchcockian thriller do have long moments of exposition needed. And remember the 10-minute psychoanalyst scene with the psychiatrist in Psycho at the end. I mean, ultimately, what I think is Argento struggling a little bit between his logic and illogic self for a few minutes, and saying, no, I am doing a realistic story here, you know. But when he is at his best, is when he doesn't give a fuck.
I mean, it's really just because he needed to establish that he had to kill the Queen Witch.
Yeah,
he had to kill the Queen Witch.
Because to that point you hadn't.
No,
But-
there's no real trajectory to get
At all.
anywhere.
But the moment between the two girls in front of the piece of cloth with the woman sleeping in the back that looks almost like an X-ray, holy shit.
It almost looks like contemporary dance, actually,
Yeah.
in a funny way.
No, it is purely theatrical. And you know, I just love, I mean, this movie, all the moments that work, any moment that works shouldn't work. You know what I'm saying? Is those are, for me, the filmmakers I'm most addicted to. The guys that go without a fucking safety net. Everybody talks about perfect films. You know, for example, to me, I'm more of a Touch of Evil guy than Citizen Kane. Because Wells goes like, fuck it, you know, in Touch of Evil, and he goes off the rails and crashes the fucking car. And it's not about control for me. Hitchcock, I love Notorious, but I'm as much of a fan of Frenzy, which is Hitchcock grabbing the car and crushing the, you know, I love filmmakers that achieve stuff that should not work. You know, when you go, I'm gonna try this, and Terry Gilliam does it all the time when he succeeds to me. So, you know, those are the guys I admire because I am a Latin fat fuck. I love the guys that achieve beauty without control. You know, what can I do?
Anybody else working today that leaps to mind?
I'm a big fan of film. So there's a lot of people I admire and watch religiously. And then there is the guys that I admire for the opposite reason,
Right,
like Chris Nolan, you know. Chris Nolan is in many ways, I admire writers that are wild phobists, you know, and I admire someone like Borges. Borges, who is precise and controlled in a way that Robert Louis Stevenson is in English. And Nolan is absolutely as precise as Borges at his best, you know. He really controls the prose of cinema in a way that very few guys do these days. You know, he's a master at work. So I love it. Huh?
Of a very different kind.
Of a very different kind. So I can admire one or the other easily. I think as a craftsman, you try to collect a library of people that you admire and that stimulate your left side of the brain or your right side of the brain, or sometimes hopefully both.
I can have probably time for one or two more if anybody has. Sorry. Oh, there we go.
When you mentioned repulsion earlier, I thought of Cocteau as well. A really strong connection with the wandering through the corridors, with the experimenting with different kinds of art direction to evoke that kind of that surrealist obviously as well.
I think that we go back to the fairy tale,
Yeah.
in a sense, because again, Cocteau, although the original Beauty and the Beast tale does have an origin, that the thing is, for the hands in the walls and all that, which is everybody that lived in the castle became an enchanted part of the castle. I think that the beauty of horror and fairy tales is that they don't depend on logic. They depend on faith and the capacity to declare. You declare the world in a fairy tale. You say, once upon a time, there was a dwarf with magical powers. You don't believe it? Go fuck yourself. You know, like, essentially, you declare. In a horror film, again, same thing. You declare, and Argento is declaring there, and Cocteau understands the most intimate dynamics of fairy tale functioning, and I think that includes that free form. But I completely agree with you, and it's fascinating to me. As corridors in both movies, completely free form. Mixing of this, mixing of that, and Cocteau's movie is at the same time a carefully crafted jewel and an incredibly modern and free movie. I mean, it's one of the top 10 movies of all times for me.
Yeah, it makes, as you start to talk about it, I'm almost thinking almost like Opals or the Earrings of Madame D, you know,
Yeah.
which also exists in this crazy dream world, and its episodic connections are quite tenuous, and yet you're totally with it.
I agree with you completely, because Opals is another filmmaker where moments, the only way I can say it is there are moments that are sustained purely by cinema.
Yeah.
You know, moments that should or shouldn't work in the and this is where it's very important. Like Fellini is pure cinema, because you cannot articulate Fellini in any other form. You cannot articulate him as a theatrical piece. You cannot articulate it as a piece of literature. You cannot articulate it as paintings in an exhibition. It exclusively exists in the realm of cinema. And the same, you know, that famous phrase, traveling is a moral matter, you know. It is truly every decision in film, to move the actor, move the camera, what the tone of the image is, are conscious decisions from the part of the director, or instinctive decisions from the part of the director. But none of them are superfluous. None of them are. Whether the director stumbles upon them or does, ultimately he lets them get into celluloid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. It's almost like you could say that when Fellini makes his break with neorealism, he's actually engaging in that kind of declarative practice.
It is.
For the first time, kind of outside of the sort of fairy tale and horror realm, for like Dolce Vita, and especially 8½, he's going like, this is the world, you know, love it or leave it.
Yeah, I think so. And he truly, all of the individuals we're talking about, the one thing that I really believe in is that exactly how their movies exist is the way they view the world. I really think Fellini saw everybody with a wide-angle lens talking to him here, maestro, maestro, you know, and this is my daughter. I mean, you know, I really think, and Argento is probably la 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 inside, you know, he's maybe having dinner with your family and he's la la la. And the thing about Argento that you realize is he is that little boy in the Victorian garb. He is that little boy, and he is both incredibly attracted and incredibly repelled by women.
The helper of the coven.
Yeah, I mean, he is between witches and infects. That's the world. You can argue about it from an ethical, moral, social, but as a fabulist, as a storyteller, that is his world, and that's the world he articulates. You have and in this world, Snow White comes in, which is Jessica Harper, who is absolutely Snow White.
Yeah, the relationship to women, there's actually some interesting connections to Fellini in that way too.
Yeah.
You know, he sort of enjoys the women as voluptuous and enjoys women as grotesque. There's always women.
Yeah.
You know, and Fellini's among them in a funny way always. Which gets him into hot water, of course.
The beauty of Fellini, and the thing that I mean, because he is an eminently male point of view in that sense, but that's why I am moved close to tears in the absolutely gorgeous way he can make a character like Gelsomina. You know, I go, for this guy to make that leap is an absolute act of acrobatics, Olympic strength. You know, he creates an incredibly gorgeous character in that.
It's really interesting for the Fellini Dream Double Bills. The three female filmmakers we actually went to, all three of them selected La Strada as the film that had this profound impact on how they actually write women characters in their own films. So, and they couldn't be more different, right? Deepa Mehta, Miranda July, and Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah, because it is the female character in Fellini's films that stands out for sure. I mean, for sure, and I think the rest of the characters again is as you say very pointedly, he is also caught between the voluptuousness and the sort of the grotesque, or the, you know, is quite a trap. I think someone here was raising their hand.
Yeah, Daniel.
I can't remember the year this experience was made. 71? Okay, because you were mentioning Brian De Palma before, and Brian De Palma used Jessica Harper in Phantom of the Paradise.
Yes.
A lot of the same running through,
Yes,
and,
yes.
and customized, running through corridors and customized
Yes.
environments and stuff. So I just wondered who stole her from who.
Did everyone hear the question?
She's talking about Jessica Harper and her relationship to another pop sort of masterpiece, which is Phantom of the Paradise, and a sort of neo-Hitchcockian Gothic musical. I mean, an amazing piece of work in my opinion. I think that she became established as a B movie or horror movie star in that sense, and I think that the movies couldn't be more different, but both have again a riff on pop and contemporary stuff, visually, color-wise, and so forth. But I think she was for a while one of the most interesting actresses to watch. But then she married the head of 20th Century Fox, Tom Broadway.
It is funny how the sort of the saucer-eyed look, that sort of Betty Davis eyes, sort of dominates that time, and you know, I guess culminating with Sissy Spacek and Carrie, right?
It is, and she. That's why I call her Snow White, in the sense that in both fables, she represents to a degree purity. You know, she represents this sort of wide-eyed, literally, Snow White figure that is between. It's got. You know, in a completely deranged environment. You know, the Phantom is one of my favorite movies of all times. It's the only 35mm print I own.
Can we borrow it?
You can. It's in good shape. It's in good shape. And I have several copies of the Phantom Mask, all the toys that were put out, the action figures of Winslow that were put out in Japan. I'm a complete freak. And I had lunch the other day and interrogated deeply Paul Williams in Los Angeles, all about that.
Still with us?
Yeah, he's adorable. And he's tiny.
I think maybe we'll take one more. I think I see one there, or over there. Who yelled out?
Oh yeah.
Go for it.
I just, based off of this whole discussion, I'm really curious to know, what are, I just noticed your worst nightmare and your favorite dream?
Yeah, I have very boring dream life. I mean, I really do. I constantly, when I'm awake, I'm fantasizing about the craziest crap. Like I never get bored. If I'm waiting for someone at the restaurant, I start thinking, what if the guy in the other table starts bleeding, and I notice that he's injured, and I see that he's hiding it under the napkin, and I go, woo! Now the dream life is very boring. I actually problem solve a lot in dreams. Like when I'm shooting a movie, I run the day, the next day or the week after in my head, and it all goes wrong, and I solve it then. And then I come to the set and I have some solutions. But I have had, a recurring dream that is really scary, that is being chased through rooftops by zombies. And the other one is being eaten by sharks. So my nightmares are eminently edible. Like, I consider myself an edible object.
Does it go together though? Like if you're chased by the zombies?
Sometimes it does.
Okay.
Without any logic. There's a great comic book called Geo, by one of the masters of horror in Japan, Junji Ito. And he has a moment where a guy is being chased by a shark in the beach, and he makes the beach, and he starts running in the sand, and the shark pops out of the water with legs. I'm almost shut myself reading the because I was totally afraid of a shark. But I have had nightmares. One that was very significant. As a child, I had lucid dreams, but as an adult, I had it once to terrifying effect. Lucid dreaming is when you wake up and you dream that you are exactly in the environment you are sleeping in. So you essentially wake up in the dream. and I woke up in my dream because through my closed eyelids I could feel fire. And I opened my eyes in the dream, and I was in bed with my wife next to me, and I looked, and there was a man on fire calmly sitting in a sofa in front of the bed, but completely in flames. And he got up and he walked to me and said, "I'm alive," and he embraced me. And I screamed and woke up horrified. It's the only time I had an interesting dream. It's pretty fucking sad.
Did he say I'm alive in English or Spanish?
I'm alive in Spanish.
Okay.
Which proves that that's the language of horror for me. That's the more primal first language. Yeah.
I think we'll call it there. Thank you all for coming. And,
thank you.
Thank you, Guillermo.
Grazie tante. I hope to see you more while I'm in Toronto. 2 or 3 of these will happen, so come over. More milk and cookies.